I sat there silent, the taste of rosemary and humiliation still on my tongue as the check landed in front of me. "She's got hers, right?" her boyfriend said, smirking without looking up. And my daughter, my only child, just smiled and sipped her drink. After dance recitals, hospital bills, college tuition, and every sacrifice a mother makes without asking for applause, I was just another name on a separate check. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. Charleston's historic district glowed in the early evening light, the gas lanterns flickering against cobblestone streets. Lydia Monroe adjusted her linen jacket as she stepped into the Pine and Pearl, the kind of trendy farm-to-table spot her daughter favored. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of rosemary and grilled peaches, chatter bouncing beneath the exposed brick and hanging Edison bulbs. Alyssa was already there, glossy hair falling over one shoulder, scrolling her phone while Travis leaned back with his arm across the banquette like he owned the place. Lydia took a breath, centered her smile, and slid into the seat across from them. "Mom, finally," Alyssa said, as if Lydia had been late. She hadn't. Travis flagged the server with 2 fingers, not bothering with a hello. "2 of your craft old-fashions," he said, tapping the menu. "And what was that starter you liked, babe?" "The burrata," Alyssa chimed in. "And oysters. 6. "Oh, and we'll do the peach tart for dessert. I'll get the scallops. What about you, Travis?" He closed the menu without looking at Lydia. "Ribeye, medium rare." The server turned politely to Lydia. She folded her hands, steady. "I'll have the roast chicken, please. Just water." The contrast landed between them like silverware dropped on stone. Alyssa gave a tiny laugh, the kind people used when they thought they were above embarrassment. Dinner unfolded in glossy fragments. Alyssa posting photos of the oysters, Travis talking about a new condo project uptown, neither of them once asking Lydia about her week. She listened, nodded, and let the conversation skim over her like rain sliding down a windshield. The chicken was tender, perfectly brined. Lydia savored each bite quietly, her attention half on the rhythm of the restaurant. Josie, the manager, weaving between tables with the ease of someone who noticed everything. The clatter from the open kitchen. The server's cautious glances whenever Travis snapped his fingers for another round. When dessert plates were cleared, the server set the leather folder at the edge of the table. Alyssa leaned forward, flashing her teeth. "Separate checks. Please," she said lightly, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Travis added with a pointed nod toward Lydia. "She's got hers, right?" For a beat, the air stilled. The couple at the next table went on laughing, oblivious, but Lydia felt the words like cold water soaking into her sleeves. She chuckled, soft, controlled, practiced. "Of course." The server blinked, uncertain, then nodded and slipped away. Across the dining room, Josie's gaze flicked toward Lydia, her brows tightening in quick sympathy before smoothing into professional neutrality. Alyssa and Travis turned back to their phones, scrolling, smiling at something only they saw. Lydia folded her napkin slowly, smoothing the linen flat against the table until every crease was gone. The checks arrived. 3 small slips of paper. 3 neat totals. Lydia reached into her purse, slid her card inside without hesitation, and set it down. Her fingers didn't tremble, not once. But inside, her chest felt carved open, like the restaurant's laughter and music had been replaced with a hollow echo. As the server carried the checks away, Lydia looked up, caught Josie's eyes again across the room. This time, Josie didn't look away. Just the barest nod, a flicker of recognition that what had just happened wasn't invisible. Lydia straightened her shoulders. She would not give Alyssa the satisfaction of seeing her flinch. The cards came back, signatures were scribbled, and Alyssa stood, slipping her arm through Travis's. "Thanks, babe," she said to him, not to her mother. Travis grinned, keys already in hand. Lydia pushed back her chair, smile fixed, as the restaurant's door swung open to let in the humid night air. And in that moment, with the echo of separate checks still hanging in her ears, Lydia made a silent promise, one Alyssa would never see coming. The humid Charleston night wrapped around Lydia as she stepped out of the Pine and Pearl, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses fading behind the closing door. She lingered just long enough to watch Alyssa and Travis stride ahead, their silhouettes sharp beneath the glow of a street lamp. "Thanks for dinner, babe," Alyssa said, her voice light, sweet as the peach tart she'd devoured. She slipped into Travis's side, kissing his cheek with practiced ease. Not a glance back. Not a word for Lydia. Travis unlocked the glossy black SUV with a chirp that sliced through the quiet. Music pulsed before the doors had even shut, bass rattling against the cobblestones as if the night belonged to them alone. They peeled away, laughter echoing faint through the open windows. Lydia stood for a moment, her hand resting on the strap of her purse, staring at the empty patch of street where their taillights had vanished. Her face held its polite composure, but inside, her chest had cooled to stone. She drew in a long breath, letting the salt-touched air fill her lungs. Then she began her walk toward the parking garage 2 blocks over. The night city was alive around her. Tourists drifting with cones of praline ice cream, couples arm in arm, carriage horses clopping down Meeting Street. Lydia noticed none of it in detail, though her senses caught fragments. The sharp sweetness of magnolia blooms, the glimmer of lanterns in shop windows, the faint laughter of college kids spilling from a rooftop bar. Her heels struck the pavement at an even pace, each step deliberate, each one a quiet refusal to quicken. Calm, outwardly, but in the marrow of her bones, a chill spread, as though her body had stored that moment at the table. Alyssa's smile, Travis's smirk, Josie's silent recognition, and now replayed it like a wound she refused to cover. By the time Lydia slid into her own modest sedan, the street had thinned. She sat with her hands on the steering wheel, the faint scent of leather and lavender sachets filling the cabin. She could have cried. She could have shouted. Instead, she drove home through the narrow lanes, her expression unreadable, as though her very skin had set into porcelain. Her cottage sat just outside the bustle of downtown, shaded by live oaks draped in Spanish moss. It was quiet when she entered, the kind of silence that waited. Lydia slipped off her shoes, set her purse down, and let her fingers trail along the worn edge of a sideboard that had once belonged to her grandmother. The hum of her refrigerator was the only sound. In the back of a desk drawer, beneath carefully folded linens and an old address book, rested a plain, manila folder. She drew it out, laid it on the polished surface, and sat down. Across the tab, in her own handwriting, the words stared back at her. Liquidity options. Her hand hovered for a long moment before she opened it. Inside were neatly organized pages, bank statements, investment summaries, a list of quiet holdings she hadn't touched in half a decade. Notes written in her script curved in the margins, reminders of choices she had once considered and then abandoned. Back then, she'd told herself she had no need to stir old ambitions. Back then, she had believed peace came from restraint. But as the clock on the mantel ticked softly, Lydia read the numbers, the strategies, the contingencies, and felt something shift. The hollow ache left by Alyssa's dismissal did not fade. It crystallized. She closed the folder, resting both palms atop it, steady as stone. Her eyes narrowed, not in sadness, but in a quiet calculation that had been sleeping for too long. Tonight, she thought, they asked for separate checks. Tomorrow, They would learn what separation truly meant. Morning light spilled through Lydia's kitchen window, pale and golden, casting long bars across the oak table. The manila folder lay where she had left it the night before, its corners sharp, its weight undeniable. She poured herself coffee, black, no sugar, and sat with the folder open, her pen tracing old numbers with new intent. The cottage was silent but for the tick of the mantel clock and the hiss of cicadas in the distance. Lydia reached for her phone. Her hand hesitated only once, hovering over a number she hadn't dialed in years. Dean Carter. She pressed the green button. The line rang twice before a gravelly voice answered. Lydia? He sounded surprised, but not displeased. Morning, Dean, she said, her tone even, clipped, but carrying a faint warmth. Do you still hold your share in the Pine and Pearl? Dean chuckled, a low sound that carried a history between them. 20%. Thought you swore you'd never touch that place again. I did. Lydia's gaze shifted to the folder, her reflection faint in the glossy plastic sleeve covering the first statement. But people change appetites. There was a pause. The background on his end was quiet. Only the faint hum of an old ceiling fan. You're telling me you're interested? I'm asking, Lydia corrected, how soon I could take majority. Dean exhaled, the sound of him leaning back in his chair almost audible through the phone. Most of it's being sold off. Quiet deal, brokers handling it, trying to keep it under the radar. Her grip on the mug tightened, the heat pressing into her palm. Then I want in before the ink's dry. He gave a short laugh, half incredulous. Now, hold on. Last time we spoke about that place, you said you'd rather eat nails than run a restaurant again. Lydia's lips curved faintly, though there was no humor in her eyes. Well, she said softly, I've developed a taste for iron. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Dean sighed. You don't make small moves, Lydia. You never did. She let the silence stretch, let him remember who she was, who she could still be. Finally, he cleared his throat. Fine. The broker's a man named Langford. Sharp, discreet. I can set up a meeting. But you need to understand, once your name's in play, it'll stir talk. My name, she said, her voice firm, doesn't go anywhere near it. Not yet. Dean grunted as if her insistence confirmed something he already knew about her. I'll make the call. Noon tomorrow, my office. Don't be late. When the call ended, Lydia placed her phone beside the folder and sat for a long moment. Outside, the oaks swayed gently, their moss whispering in the wind. She felt the pulse of something she hadn't allowed herself in years, momentum. Her daughter had dismissed her as a burden, her presence an afterthought. But now, Lydia felt the burn of resolve rising in her veins like a second youth. She stood, walked to the window, and touched the cool glass. The city was waiting, its streets, its deals, its quiet power brokers, and this time she would not stand on the sidelines. The clock struck 10. Lydia turned back to the table, tapped the folder once with her finger, and allowed herself a single smile. By tomorrow, she thought, the first stone would be set in motion, and Alyssa, so smug in her belief that her mother was finished, would never hear it coming. The next afternoon, Lydia stood before the glass-fronted law office of Ruiz and Associates, its brass plaque gleaming in the Charleston sun. She pushed the door open, the faint scent of lemon polish and paper greeting her like an old acquaintance. Lydia Monroe, came a familiar voice. Carol Ruiz emerged from her office with the brisk confidence of someone who'd spent 4 decades dismantling careless contracts. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled into a smooth bun, and her wire-rimmed glasses caught the light as she smiled. I had a feeling I'd see you again before retirement. Lydia managed the ghost of a smile. Thought you might still have a few tricks left for me. Carol ushered her in, closing the heavy door behind them. You never call unless you're serious. So, what's on the table? Lydia set her leather folio on the desk, opened it, and slid across a slip of paper with the restaurant's name scrawled at the top. The Pine and Pearl. Quiet sale in motion. I want the whole thing. Carol's eyebrows arched, but her voice stayed level. Last I checked, you swore off hospitality after the Greenville contract. What changed? Let's say, Lydia replied evenly. My appetite returned. Carol tapped her pen against the desk, studying Lydia's face. And you don't want your name tied to it yet, correct? Correct, Lydia said. I want an anonymous holding company, shell structure, clean, but impenetrable. A slow grin curved across Carol's mouth. You've thought this through. I've had all night, Lydia answered. Carol leaned back, scribbling notes in her precise, slanted script. Fine. We'll create a Delaware LLC, completely detached from your personal accounts. The offer will be strong. Full purchase, not piecemeal. And we'll build in an option clause for immediate replacement of current management. Lydia nodded, her gaze steady. That clause is non-negotiable. Carol's pen paused. You already have someone in mind? Not yet, Lydia admitted. But I know who I don't want. And I don't intend to be surprised. The room fell quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Then Carol slid the draft across the desk. Here's how we'll structure the wire transfer. You'll front the majority. Dean Carter has already agreed to retain his 20% as a silent partner. That will give you control without noise. Dean's name hung in the air like a sturdy anchor, grounding the deal in trust Lydia hadn't felt in years. Carol adjusted her glasses. This isn't small change, Lydia. Once you sign, there's no pulling back. Lydia looked down at the transfer forms, her reflection mirrored in the glass desktop. She thought of Alyssa's laugh, Travis's smug tilt of the head. The word separate dropped like a blade across a dinner table. Her pulse stayed steady. She picked up the pen. Pulling back, Lydia said, isn't in my nature anymore. The ink flowed clean and final across the signature line. Carol collected the pages, stacking them neatly. It's done. In 48 hours, you'll own the Pine and Pearl. Lydia exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment pressing into her shoulders and then lifting, leaving her taller in the chair. For the first time in years, she wasn't on the outside looking in. As she rose to leave, Carol's voice followed her, dry but warm. You've always known how to play the long game, Lydia. Just make sure they never see the hand you're holding. Lydia paused at the door, her hand on the brass knob. She glanced back, her expression calm, but her eyes sharp with resolve. They won't, she promised. And as she stepped into the Charleston sunlight, the tide of the city whispering at her back, Lydia knew the stage was set. Soon, Alyssa and Travis would walk into that restaurant believing nothing had changed, and Lydia would be waiting on the other side of the table. Friday evening in Charleston hummed with its usual chorus, street musicians on King Street, the thrum of horse-drawn carriages, the ocean breeze carrying salt and jasmine through the air. Lydia stepped out of her car just a block from the Pine and Pearl. The restaurant glowed like a jewel against the cobblestones, lantern light spilling across the windows where laughter and clinking glasses rippled out into the night. Inside, nothing looked changed. Crisp white napkins folded like sailboats, servers balancing trays with the fluidity of dancers, the smell of charred steak and citrus rising from the open kitchen. Lydia asked for a table. The hostess didn't hesitate. Right this way, Ms. Monroe, as though she'd been expecting her. And then, of course, fate set the stage. At the center of the dining room, Alyssa and Travis sat with two other couples, their laughter pitched louder than necessary, like actors performing for the crowd. Their table overflowed with cocktails, oysters, and gleaming plates. Alyssa waved her manicured hand as if commanding an audience. Travis leaning back with smug ease, recounting some deal that had gone 6 figures overnight. Lydia's chosen table, her table now, was only 3 down. She sat with poise, smoothing her jacket, eyes flicking once toward her daughter's group before settling on her menu. To anyone watching, she was merely a woman dining alone. Josie, the manager, approached to check in. Her dark hair was pulled into a bun tonight, her sharp eyes scanning Lydia's face with quiet recognition. As she laid down the wine list, her fingers brushed the edge of Lydia's napkin, sliding a folded slip of paper underneath. Lydia waited until Josie had walked away before she opened it. 3 small words, scrawled in neat script. I know. A pulse of heat rose in Lydia's chest. The room around her blurred for a moment. Just noise and clinking glass. She tucked the note back under her plate and reached for her water. Calm, composed. Dinner passed in deliberate motions, her roasted trout arriving, each bite savored while Alyssa's group grew louder, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Travis ordered another round, then another. He gestured broadly at the server, his voice cutting through the hum. And keep the AC down, would you? Feels like a meat locker in here. Lydia dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin. By the time dessert was finished, Alyssa's table was restless. Travis raised his hand again, snapping for attention. When Josie approached, he leaned back with a smirk. Get the manager, he said, voice dripping with entitlement. We're not paying these prices to freeze through dinner. Josie's expression didn't shift. Calm, professional, but her eyes glittered with something sharp. Of course, she said. Then she turned her head slightly, her voice carrying across the room. You can speak to the new owner. The air in the restaurant tightened. Alyssa's laugh died mid-breath. Travis frowned, looking around as if to spot some faceless executive strolling in from the back. But it was Lydia who rose. She placed her napkin neatly on the table, stood with unhurried grace, and walked toward them, heels clicking softly against the polished wood. Every eye in the room pivoting to follow. Alyssa's face drained of color. Travis sat straighter, his smirk faltering. Lydia stopped just at the edge of their table, her gaze level, her presence steady and unshakable. Good evening, she said, her voice calm as glass about to crack. The following Monday, the restaurant was silent except for the low hum of refrigeration and the faint hiss of the espresso machine warming up. Lydia sat at a corner table near the window, papers spread before her like a general arranging maps before battle. Dean Carter leaned back in his chair opposite, glasses perched on the end of his nose, scanning the draft menu with a skeptical frown. You really want to cut the caviar toast? He asked. His voice carried the gravel of years spent in smoky kitchens. I want to cut the performance, Lydia replied, tapping the page with her pen. Half of this menu was designed for Instagram, not for a dining room. We're not serving vanity anymore. Dean chuckled, though his eyes lingered on her with something like admiration. You've still got the blade. Lydia turned the page, circling the seared scallops, Alyssa's favorite to flaunt online, always captioned with some airy line about indulgence. This goes too. Dean lifted his brows. That's a bestseller. It's a prop, Lydia countered. We don't need props. From across the room, Josie approached, holding a notepad already filled with scribbles. Her sharp eyes gleamed with both nerves and anticipation. I've been tracking what actually sells versus what sits, she said, sliding the pad across the table. Your instincts are right. People order the showpieces once. They come back for the roast chicken, the biscuits, the trout. Lydia smiled faintly, a rare warmth in her expression. Then those are what we honor. She reached for a fresh sheet of paper, writing in neat, deliberate strokes. Quiet generosity menu, prefix, 3 courses, no substitutions. Dean gave a low whistle. You'll scare half of Charleston off with that rule, Good, Lydia said without looking up. The other half will understand why it matters. Josie's grin flickered. I'll enforce it. Not just enforce it, Lydia replied. She slid an envelope across the table. Inside was a letter embossed with the restaurant's crest. You're the new general manager. Josie froze, the words catching in her throat. Me? You see more than anyone else in this room, Lydia said evenly. You've been holding this place up without recognition. That ends now. For the first time, Josie's composure cracked into genuine shock, her cheeks flushing with pride. She clasped the envelope like it was something fragile. Thank you, I won't let you down. Dean gave a low laugh. She's got your fire, Lydia. Maybe sharper. Lydia only nodded. She wasn't giving compliments. She was investing. The restructuring extended beyond the menu. By midweek, Lydia had reviewed the payroll, rewritten the bonus system, and called a full staff meeting. The line cooks who had been scraping by on flat wages now saw quarterly performance bonuses tied to teamwork. Servers who went above and beyond earned profit shares instead of token tips. The staff buzzed with an energy that had been missing for years, eyes brighter, backs straighter. In the quiet after the meeting, Lydia found herself at the bar. The room was empty, save for the bartender polishing glasses and the faint scent of lemon peel lingering in the air. She ordered nothing, simply laid her notebook on the counter and began jotting thoughts in her steady hand. Dignity in service. Earned, not displayed. Food that whispers instead of shouts. Her pen paused, hovering over the page. She thought of Alyssa, of her daughter's carefully curated feeds, the endless stream of meals photographed for strangers to covet. A hollow satisfaction, brittle as sugar glass. Lydia closed the notebook softly, resting her palm on its cover. She stared at the rows of empty wine glasses hanging above the bar, their shapes catching fragments of light, multiplying it across the polished wood. The restaurant felt different now. Quieter, sharper, its heartbeat syncing with her own. She lifted her chin, meeting her own reflection in the bar mirror. For the first time in years, she saw not just a mother or a consultant past her prime, but a woman in full command of her table. A voice echoed in her mind. Not her own, but Alyssa's. Separate checks, please. Lydia let the words settle, not as pain this time, but as fuel. Because the next time Alyssa walked into this dining room, the menu, and the rules, would already belong to Lydia. By Friday afternoon, the phones at the Pine and Pearl rang non-stop, every line manned by a host with a waiting list stretching weeks out. Word of the new prix-fixe menu had spread fast, locals posting snapshots of biscuits plated like sculpture, diners marveling at the no substitutions rule that gave the place a backbone. Reservations had become a badge of status, one Alyssa Monroe assumed she could claim without question. Saturday morning, she perched on the edge of her sleek condo's white leather sofa, nails clicking against her phone screen as she scrolled the restaurant's booking page. Fully booked. Every slot. 6 weeks. Her mouth twisted. That's impossible. Travis, sprawled across the armchair in gym shorts, didn't look up from his laptop. Just have your mom call. She owns the place now, right? Problem solved. Alyssa hesitated. She hadn't spoken to Lydia since that dinner, since the humiliating reveal. Still, entitlement was a muscle she never let atrophy. She dialed, waiting through 3 rings, then 4. The call clicked to voicemail. Mom, she said, forcing brightness into her tone. We're trying to get a table for tonight. Can you sort that out? Thanks. She hung up before the message could betray the tightness in her throat. An hour passed. No reply. Another hour. Still nothing. By 7 o'clock, Alyssa had painted on her best dress and her boldest smile. We'll just show up, she told Travis as they slid into the SUV. They wouldn't dare turn us away. Downtown Charleston pulsed with weekend energy, couples spilling out of wine bars, the glow of lanterns on brick, laughter bouncing along the narrow streets. The Pine and Pearl shone at the center of it all, its windows alive with diners leaning over candlelight. Inside, the foyer buzzed with waiting guests. Alyssa strode to the hostess stand, her heels clicking sharp against the tile. "Monroe," she said crisply. "Table for two. We should be on the list." The young hostess scanned her screen, polite but unmoved. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We're fully booked. The earliest opening is in 6 weeks." Alyssa's laugh was sharp enough to draw a glance from nearby diners. "That's ridiculous. You don't know who you're talking to? My mother owns this restaurant." The hostess blinked, her expression softening only into practiced professionalism. "I understand, but without a reservation, the wait tonight is approximately 2 hours." Travis shifted beside her, lowering his voice. "Just wait. It'll look worse if you make a scene." But Alyssa's composure cracked. She leaned forward, her voice rising. "Do you think I'm going to stand in line like some tourist? Put us at a table now." A ripple of silence spread across the foyer. Guests turned, curious, amused. The hostess's cheeks flushed, but before she could respond, Josie appeared from the dining room. Calm, measured, shoulders squared. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, her gaze landing directly on Alyssa. Alyssa straightened, smoothing her hair as though she could smooth her own fury. "Yes. We're supposed to be seated, and she's refusing. You need to fix this." Josie's face remained neutral, her voice steady but firm. "We have a full house tonight, Ms. Monroe. You'll need to wait, just like everyone else." Alyssa opened her mouth, but Josie raised her hand, polite, final. "Please step aside. Others are waiting patiently." The words hung in the air like a verdict. Alyssa's cheeks burned, her spine stiffening against the weight of every watching eye. Travis touched her elbow, urging her back, but she stood rooted, caught between outrage and humiliation. Behind the hostess stand, the waitlist screen glowed mercilessly. 6 weeks out. Names above hers that would eat before she did. And somewhere inside, at the corner booth she couldn't touch, Lydia was waiting. The restaurant was quiet on Monday morning, still carrying the echoes of Saturday night's chaos. Lydia sat alone at her corner booth, sunlight spilling across the polished wood. Her phone lay in front of her, screen aglow, open to a photograph she hadn't looked at in years. It was Alyssa, maybe 10 years old, grinning as she slid a $5 bill under a saucer at the old riverfront cafe. Lydia had coached her through the ritual, how to look the server in the eye, say thank you, and leave more than what was expected. "Generosity is a language," she had told her daughter. "Speak it fluently, and people will never forget you." Lydia touched the glass of her phone. That child's smile, wide and unself-conscious, was almost unrecognizable beside the sharp woman Alyssa had become. She swiped to another album. Birthdays at the Pine and Pearl 2 decades ago. Cakes ablaze with candles. Alyssa making wishes, Lydia clapping with pride. Those nights had been warm with laughter when the restaurant was simply a place of joy and not a battlefield. Her thumb hovered, then tapped the screen. One by one, the photos dissolved into deletion, and when she came to the folder titled Alyssa's Engagement, she hesitated only a breath before erasing it entirely. The silence that followed was heavy, but cleansing. Some ties were better cut than clung to. Later that afternoon, Josie joined her at the booth, a leather notebook tucked under her arm. She sat with the eager energy of someone who finally had room to run. "You wanted to talk mission statement?" Josie asked. "Yes." Lydia's voice was steady. "This restaurant needs a spine stronger than the food. It needs a truth." Together, they drafted words on a clean page. Lydia wrote slowly, with the precision of a woman who understood the weight of language. Earned, never expected. Josie traced the phrase with her fingertip, nodding. That feels like you. It's not just me, Lydia corrected. It's what this place will stand for. No entitlement. Not from guests. Not from staff. Not from family. The last word lingered in the air, sharp as lemon zest. Josie didn't push. She only nodded, respect written across her face. By week's end, Lydia had transferred $50,000 into a local culinary foundation, earmarked specifically for single mothers pursuing hospitality degrees. No press release, no ribbon cutting, just a letter to the director with the stipulation that anonymity be respected. "This is for women who know the weight of sacrifice," she wrote at the bottom. When the Charleston Post and Courier caught wind of the scholarship, a reporter called Lydia personally. They wanted an interview, a feature piece on the mysterious benefactor and the rebirth of the Pine and Pearl. Lydia listened, lips pressed in a thin line, then declined. "The restaurant will speak for itself," she said, and hung up before they could push. That evening she returned to her booth, ordering only a pot of tea. The room filled around her with the quiet buzz of guests who no longer needed spectacle to feel satisfied. The staff moved with purpose, Josie at the helm, and Lydia found herself watching not with scrutiny, but with pride. Her phone buzzed on the table. A text from an unknown number. "We need to talk." The sender signed with a single letter. A. Lydia set the phone face down, steam rising from her cup. For the first time in years, she felt no urgency to respond. It came on a Wednesday morning, slipped into the stack of overnight mail like any other piece of paper. Carol Ruiz opened the envelope in her office, skimmed the legal jargon, and let out a laugh so sharp her paralegal peeked around the doorframe. "Something funny?" the young man asked. Carol held up the document between two fingers, shaking her head. "Not funny. Pathetic." The petition was stamped and filed, Alyssa Monroe requesting financial conservatorship over Lydia Monroe, citing diminished capacity. By the time Lydia arrived, Carol had the paperwork waiting on her desk, a fresh mug of coffee steaming at her elbow. "She actually filed this," Lydia murmured, scanning the lines. Her tone was even, but her knuckles whitened against the edge of the desk. Carol leaned back, arms crossed, eyes flashing with disdain. "She doesn't have a case. You're solvent, competent, and sharper than half the boardrooms in this city. This is a tantrum, not a legal argument." Lydia placed the petition down carefully, smoothing the pages flat as though taming a wild thing. "A tantrum can still leave scratches." "Not if I sharpen the claws first." Carol slid over a draft response already in progress. "We'll hit this with a motion to dismiss and tack on asset protection clauses. If she thought she could claw her way into your holdings, she's about to learn what a locked vault feels like." Lydia's eyes narrowed, a flicker of steel beneath her calm surface. "File it today." By Friday, the court date came and went in a windowless chamber where Alyssa's attorney stumbled through arguments that wilted under the judge's questions. Lydia sat composed at the defense table, Carol at her side, the polished wood cool beneath her fingertips. "Petition dismissed with prejudice," the judge announced. His gavel cracked once, final and unambiguous. "This matter is closed." Lydia inclined her head in a gesture almost regal, then rose, her heels clicking against marble as she left without a glance at her daughter. The fallout was swift and merciless. Charleston's social circles were small, and news traveled faster than cocktails at a gala. Alyssa's circle of friends dissected the failed power grab with savage curiosity. On Instagram, one so-called friend posted a screenshot of the court docket with a caption that burned brighter than any official ruling. "You really tried to steal your mom's restaurant?" The comments filled with disbelief, gossip, and laughter. Alyssa, once the darling of dinner parties and sponsored lifestyle posts, was now a cautionary tale threaded through Charleston's feeds. At the restaurant, Lydia sipped her evening tea in her corner booth, watching the staff move with the rhythm she had orchestrated. Around her, guests leaned into conversations, unaware that the woman in the booth had just shut down an attempted coup from her only daughter. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Alyssa, unread. Another voicemail, unreturned. Lydia pressed the phone silent, then folded her hands neatly in her lap. Control had always been Alyssa's addiction. Tonight proved just how little of it she actually held. And as Lydia's gaze swept across her restaurant, hers, by law and by will, the question shifted from how far Alyssa would go to how much further Lydia herself was willing to push. Sunday dawned clear, the Charleston airlight with salt and sunshine. At the Pine and Pearl, the dining room glowed in a softer register, white tablecloths pulled back, windows open to let the spring breeze drift through. The clatter of silverware was replaced with laughter, the scent of butter and rising dough filling the space. This wasn't a day for paying guests. Lydia had unlocked the doors herself that morning, welcoming neighbors from the surrounding streets and every member of her staff. It was a brunch meant to feel like home. She stood in the kitchen in a flour-dusted apron, sleeves rolled, hands steady as she worked the dough. Gentle with it, she told the young prep cook beside her. Biscuits rise best when you don't bully them. It was her grandmother's recipe, written in looping script on a yellowed card now tacked above the prep station. But the motions lived in Lydia's bones. The fold, the press, the gentle cut of a round cutter tapping against metal trays. The oven gave back the smell of butter and history, a scent that filled more than stomachs. By mid-morning, the dining room was alive. Servers who usually carried trays sat with their families. Line cooks laughed with neighbors who had never stepped past the foyer before. Children darted between tables with sticky fingers, chasing each other in circles. Lydia moved among them, biscuit basket in hand, offering seconds and thirds with the same gracious nod. At one corner, Josie sat with a teenage girl in a borrowed apron, her expression patient as she guided the girl through the steps of folding napkins. It's not just cloth, Josie told her. It's the welcome, the small things people remember. The girl nodded, eyes wide, drinking in every word. Lydia paused, watching the two of them, a flicker of pride rising like a warm tide. At the bar, Dean nursed a cup of coffee, looking out at the scene with a wistful smile. When Lydia approached, he raised his mug. "You built something better than I ever did," he said simply. She leaned against the polished wood, her voice low, firm. "And I didn't have to beg for a seat." Dean chuckled, shaking his head. "No, you claimed it. Big difference." By noon, the biscuits had vanished, plates licked clean, the room buzzing with a satisfaction more real than any fine dining review could capture. And outside the windows, passers-by peered in longingly, pressing faces against the glass at the laughter inside. The Pine and Pearl had become something else entirely, a place no longer available on a whim. Reservations stretched 6 weeks, the wait list a living document of names hoping for their turn. And yet here, today, Lydia gave it freely. Not for status, but for community. As the last trays were cleared, Lydia returned to her booth with a cup of tea. The sunlight hit the brass plaque newly affixed to the wall. Table 1. For those who paid their dues. A promise, etched into the space itself. The staff drifted past her, each pausing with a word of thanks, a nod of respect. Lydia accepted them quietly, never overstated, but her gaze carried the calm certainty of a woman who had built something lasting without needing applause. Her phone buzzed again, face down on the table. She ignored it. Outside, the streets carried the hum of Charleston life, but inside, her restaurant pulsed with something stronger. Roots taking hold, stretching deep. And in that hum, in that warmth, Lydia felt the echo of what she had always wanted. Family. Not the one she had given everything to, but the one she had built herself. Which made the silence of her unanswered phone feel less like neglect and more like a warning. The podcast studio was tucked above a bookstore downtown, its walls lined with mismatched foam panels, its air faintly musty with old paper and brewed coffee. Lydia sat across from the host, a soft-voiced local journalist who specialized in human interest stories, and adjusted the headset they offered her. "I don't want my name in this," Lydia had said at the start. "Not until the very end." The host nodded, their voice gentle as they hit record. "Just tell it the way you lived it." And so Lydia spoke. She spoke of dinners where gratitude was absent, of the quiet sting of being treated as an afterthought, of watching her only child choose vanity over substance. Her words came measured, each one clipped of bitterness, polished into calm truths. "I didn't want revenge," she said into the mic. "I wanted dignity. And when I was told we'd split the check, I decided to split something else instead." The interview wound through her decisions, the purchase, the changes to the menu, the scholarships given quietly. The host listened in reverent silence, knowing a story that needed no exaggeration. At the very end, Lydia let the final line settle into the room like a blade sliding cleanly into its sheath. "I bought the place where she split the check." The host's eyes widened. They didn't need to press for more. By Thursday, the episode had gone live. By Friday, it was everywhere. People replayed the last 10 seconds again and again, gasping, laughing, texting links to friends. "You have to hear this one." The Pine and Pearls reservation page crashed twice under the flood of new requests. Emails poured in, not just from locals, but from across the country. People thanking Lydia for giving voice to dignity, for showing that quiet strength could be louder than spectacle. Fan mail arrived at the restaurant addressed simply to the new owner. Lydia skimmed them without indulgence, stacking them neatly in a drawer she never locked. Meanwhile, Alyssa scrambled. On Instagram, she posted a carefully lit video of herself at her condo, voice trembling but painted in defiance. "Don't believe everything you hear. Family business is complicated." But the comments turned against her within hours. "So it's true," one wrote. "You humiliated your mom and then tried to take her restaurant?" Brands that had once courted her pulled back. A skincare sponsor quietly deleted her from their feed. A boutique hotel canceled a collaboration. One follower screenshot a private email chain and posted it. "We're no longer aligned with your values." Alyssa tried again the next day, posting old photos of her with Lydia, captioned with forced affection. The comments flooded in sharper this time, accusing her of spin, of desperation. The likes dwindled to a trickle. At the Pine and Pearl, Josie showed Lydia her phone, wide-eyed at the viral surge. "You could make a statement," she said. "Ride the wave." But Lydia only shook her head, sipping her tea at table 1. "I've already said everything I needed to. Once." Her refusal made the story grow even larger. The silence itself became part of the myth. By the following week, the waiting list stretched 2 months out, and strangers lingered outside the restaurant just to take photos of the brass plaque at her booth. Lydia remained untouched by the frenzy, her focus steady, her posture calm. And yet, as she closed her notebook one night and prepared to leave, a thought flickered. Unbidden, but sharp. Alyssa wasn't finished. The podcast had burned her carefully curated image to ash, and people desperate for image rarely surrendered without a fight. The restaurant was fuller than ever on Friday night, a quiet hum of clinking glasses and low conversation spilling into the Charleston air. But in the far corner, tucked beneath the glow of a lantern and framed by tall windows, one booth remained untouched until Lydia arrived. Table 1. The staff had begun calling it that without instruction, as though the restaurant itself had decided who it belonged to. The booth's new brass plaque gleamed against the wood, for those who paid their dues. Josie had it commissioned, surprising Lydia with the unveiling one afternoon. Now, each evening, the staff ensured it stayed polished, Fresh gardenias placed in a small vase at the center, Lydia's favorite scent, their white petals a quiet reminder of grace over grandeur. She slipped into the seat as naturally as if it were her own living room chair. Servers passed with discreet nods, guests glanced curiously, some recognizing her as the woman from the podcast. The booth had become a landmark, a piece of living lore. Tourists often approached shyly, phones in hand, asking, "Would it be all right if we took a photo?" Lydia always granted it with a polite smile, rising from her seat so couples or families could squeeze into the booth. She even leaned into their joy, offering to take the picture herself if hands were trembling. But once, when Alyssa appeared in line on a busy evening, phone clutched tightly like a shield, Lydia's expression cooled. She saw her daughter waiting for the same permission given to strangers. Alyssa's eyes held defiance edged with desperation. Lydia simply turned away. The guests after Alyssa, two women from Ohio celebrating a birthday, were welcomed with ease. They laughed, posed, thanked her as though she were a gracious hostess. Alyssa lingered a moment longer, face taut with indignation, before slipping back into the crowd, her chance gone. The rules were unspoken but clear. Table 1 was for Lydia, or for anyone who had walked enough years to earn it. Guests over 65 were invited with ceremony to sit in her booth when she wasn't there, their delight genuine, their gratitude quiet but immense. It became a tradition that spread quickly, whispered about in articles and forums. At the Pine and Pearl, elders eat at the owner's table. Lydia watched it unfold with the calm of someone who knew she had created not just a restaurant, but a ritual. The plaque did more than mark territory. It rewrote who deserved reverence in a world too quick to discard its elders. One evening, as Josie set down Lydia's tea, she leaned in and murmured, "It's more than a table now, it's a standard." Lydia nodded, her gaze sweeping the room. Guests leaned over their meals, staff moved with confidence, and in her booth, the booth, she felt both rooted and untouchable. But comfort was never without shadow. That night, as Lydia gathered her things to leave, she passed the front windows where tourists pressed their phones against the glass for a glimpse of her booth. Among them, half hidden by the crowd, Alyssa stood watching. No phone, no forced smile this time. Just her face, pale and unreadable in the lamplight. Their eyes met for only a moment before Alyssa slipped into the darkness of the street. Lydia stepped into the night air, her hand tightening on her purse strap. For the first time since claiming Table 1, she felt the weight of its name not as comfort, but as a question. Had she truly saved the seat for herself? Or was someone always waiting to take it back? It was a humid Thursday night, the dining room pulsing with its usual rhythm, forks against china, laughter curling under the low hum of music. Lydia sat at Table 1, a vase of gardenias perfuming the air, when Josie appeared at her side. Her voice was low, careful. "She's here. She wants to talk. Only if you're willing." Lydia's gaze didn't flicker, though her fingers tightened slightly around the stem of her teacup. She set it down, dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin, and rose. "Show me where." Josie led her toward the back, then paused at the door to the patio. Beyond the glass, Alyssa stood alone in the glow of the street lamp, arms wrapped around herself, her dress clinging slightly in the damp night air. For a heartbeat, Lydia considered turning back, but she pushed through the door, the hinges sighing open. The night pressed close, heavy with salt and summer. Lydia crossed her arms, her stance sharp, her voice even. "Well?" Alyssa turned, her face pale but flushed at the edges, as though she'd been swallowing words too long. Her eyes glistened, though she tried to steady them. "I'm not proud of what I did." Her voice cracked. She forced herself to meet her mother's gaze. The dinners, the lawsuit, all of it. "I thought—" She choked back a sound, swallowed hard. I thought you'd always take care of me. That you'd never. Lydia cut in, her words deliberate, clean. You ordered separate checks. She let the silence stretch until Alyssa flinched. I gave you separate lives. The air thickened between them. Alyssa pressed her hands together, nails digging into her palms. I wasn't ready to be on my own, she whispered. I thought you'd fix it, like you always did. Lydia studied her daughter in the lamplight, eyes rimmed red, posture crumpled. Not the sharp, status-chasing woman she had presented to the world, but someone stripped of polish, undone by her own miscalculations. For a moment, Lydia almost saw the child from long ago, clutching a $5 bill with pride as she tipped a weary waitress. But that vision dissolved under the weight of the woman before her. Alyssa's voice dropped further, almost inaudible. Can we ever fix this? Lydia exhaled slowly, the gardenia scent still clinging faintly to her hands. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she let the question hang in the Charleston night, as steady and unrelenting as the cicadas' chorus. Her silence was sharper than any rebuke. Alyssa's shoulders trembled, caught between defiance and desperation. Her lips parted, as though she might beg, but no words came. Lydia shifted, unfolding her arms at last, but her expression revealed nothing. Only control. Only choice. The patio door opened behind her, spilling a slice of warm light across the bricks. Josie's silhouette hovered there, waiting. Lydia turned her head slightly, enough for Alyssa to see that the decision, whatever it would be, was entirely hers. And then she stepped back toward the door, leaving the night heavy with the question Alyssa had dared to ask but could not force her mother to answer. The application came in on a Monday morning, tucked between resumes from culinary students and part-time college kids. Josie skimmed the name at the top and let out the smallest exhale of disbelief. Alyssa Monroe. She didn't call Lydia. She didn't need to. The owner's silence after that patio encounter still lingered, heavier than any verdict. Josie simply scheduled the interview and waited. When Alyssa arrived, she was overdressed, heels too sharp, blouse too crisp for a hostess role. She perched on the edge of the chair across from Josie's desk, hands folded tightly in her lap. I want to work here, Alyssa said. Her voice carried no confidence, only a rehearsed steadiness that cracked at the edges. Josie met her with a straight face. This isn't a stage for appearances, it's service. You'll be on your feet. You'll deal with people who don't care who you are. Still interested? Alyssa hesitated, her nails pressing half-moons into her palms. Yes. Josie leaned back, pen tapping against her notepad. Fine. Saturdays and Sundays to start. Minimum wage plus pooled tips. No special treatment. Alyssa nodded once, jaw clenched. By that weekend, Dean was waiting at the hostess stand. His white shirt was rolled at the sleeves, his presence quiet but unshakable. You'll learn from me, he said simply, handing her the seating chart. The first hours were brutal. Alyssa fumbled over names, tripped on chair legs, earned side-eyes from staff who had watched her sweep through the restaurant months earlier with entitlement. Guests noticed too. Recognition flickered, whispers spread. Isn't that the daughter? Lydia passed through the dining room once, pausing just long enough to watch Alyssa stumble as she guided a family to their table. She didn't speak. She didn't soften. She moved on, her gardenias trailing their scent behind her. Each shift stripped something away from Alyssa. By the third weekend, the heels were gone, replaced by flats. The tailored blouse gave way to the same black uniform every hostess wore. Her voice, once pitched for show, lowered to something steadier. She stopped talking about herself. She began listening. Good evening, she told a couple celebrating their anniversary, meaning it when she asked about their evening. She carried waters to a table without being asked, a small gesture but noticed by the servers. She even managed a genuine smile when a child spilled his drink, offering extra napkins instead of recoiling. Dean observed from the bar, saying little but nodding faintly when Josie caught his eye. The change was slow, uneven, but it was there. Lydia left no words for Alyssa directly, but her hand was visible on the staff board each week. Notes written in her looping script. Good service is humility in motion. Generosity isn't money, it's attention. Respect is earned, not demanded. Alyssa read them every shift, her gaze lingering longer than she admitted. By the end of the month, guests had stopped whispering with ridicule. Instead, they spoke with quiet surprise. "She's actually good at this," one said. "She thanks us like she means it." The staff, once cool, began to let her in slowly. A server shared a tray balancing trick. A line cook offered her a biscuit after a long shift. Josie caught Alyssa once, lingering at the board, fingertips brushing the last note Lydia had posted. But Lydia herself remained silent. She moved through the restaurant with the composure of a queen who knew every corner of her realm. If her eyes met her daughter's, they passed over without comment. For Alyssa, it was both punishment and fuel. Every shift was a test she wasn't sure she'd ever pass. One Saturday evening, after closing, she lingered at the hostess stand, the dining room finally dark. The brass plaque at table 1 caught the moonlight from the window, its words gleaming, "For those who paid their dues." Alyssa stood there for a long time, the words burning deeper than any lecture her mother could have delivered. And for the first time, she whispered to herself, "Maybe I haven't yet." Behind her, a voice stirred in the shadows. Calm, unmistakable. "You're right." Alyssa spun, breath caught in her throat. Her mother stood there watching. The Pine and Pearl was alive with its Saturday brunch rush, sunlight streaming through tall windows and scattering across the dining room like champagne bubbles. The clink of forks, the laughter of families, the soft thrum of live jazz from a corner trio. Every sound folded together into the heartbeat of a place fully claimed. From the balcony that overlooked the dining room, Lydia stood with her hands resting lightly on the railing. Below her, the staff moved in crisp harmony, servers weaving through tables, trays balanced with ease, cooks calling orders with precision. No chaos, no posturing, only rhythm, like the tide. The brass plaque at table 1 gleamed in the sunlight. "For those who paid their dues." A couple in their 70s sat there today, holding hands as they split a basket of biscuits. Their joy was quiet but palpable, and Lydia felt something warm stir in her chest. Dean Carter joined her at the balcony, a mimosa in hand. His hair caught the light, more silver than salt now. But his grin was steady. He raised the glass toward her, his voice low over the hum below. "Still glad you bought it?" Lydia turned her gaze toward the plaque, then back to Dean. The years of silence, the dinners, the betrayals. All of it had led here, to this moment where her life was not diminished but sharpened. She nodded once, the faintest smile on her lips. "Best check I ever paid." Dean chuckled, taking a long sip, content to let the words settle into the air like truth finally spoken aloud. Down below, Alyssa appeared at the edge of the dining room, dressed in the simple black uniform, her hair pulled back. No heels, no performance. She moved steadily, a carafe of coffee in hand, her posture neither proud nor defeated, simply present. She reached Lydia's table, pouring with care. "Fresh coffee?" she asked softly, her tone free of bitterness, free of demand. For the first time in months, Lydia looked at her daughter without the filter of old wounds. Alyssa's hands didn't tremble. Her eyes carried no plea, only effort. Lydia gave the smallest nod. "Thank you." Alyssa moved on, the carafe balanced in her hand, greeting the next table with a quiet smile. Lydia watched her go, not with triumph, not with suspicion, but with something closer to release. She lifted the cup, inhaling the steam. Outside, the Charleston sun lit the brass plaque again, casting its reflection across the polished wood floors like a reminder, like a promise. Lydia took a slow sip, the warmth of the coffee grounding her, steadying her. The past had been divided at a table, the future written in contracts and silence. But here was the proof of what she had built, of what she had endured, of what she had earned. Her gaze lingered on the bustling room, her staff, her community, her daughter carrying coffee with unforced grace. She split the check, Lydia thought, her lips curving faintly as she set her cup down. So, I split the legacy,